Let me do.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and you're watching Web3TV on Phoenix Crypto TV 44.6. Today, my guest, Vesa, is a very well-respected artist within the crypto and Bitcoin community, and he's going to talk about how art applies to crypto and how you can get involved if you're interested. Stick around. Hi, Vesa. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
So I was just giving you a brief introduction and saying that you were a well-respected artist within the Bitcoin crypto community, and that you were going to tell us, what that entails.
Sure. I suppose it's a bit of a vast question, but where it's easy, I suppose, to start from is how I see this whole movement, or what this whole thing is about, is basically the separation of state and money. That for the past 6,000 years or so, it's been kings and governments who pretty much control the issuance of currency. And now with the blockchain invention of the technology, as well as Bitcoin, it's something that has become possible for you and I to even start our own money. And that's quite an evolution in our human system. And it might be among one of the most important ones that we've experienced in a long, long time. And it's forcing a lot of different kinds of innovation. It's certainly, as an artist, thinking of all the different kind of connotations that it has, going back historically, of the separation of church and state, of what that meant, how many different kind of flourishings it led to, and some good and some bad. But let's say scientifically and in terms of flourishing of the whole of the sort of economic wealth and these kinds of things, it's been a massive thing. And I don't think the separation of money and state is any less than that. So as an artist, I get to be almost like a war photographer and try and sense those things that are bubbling to the surface that no one has made into an image or a communication, then make an art piece about it, and then I write about it also, the whole thing, and creativity and those kinds of things in the tech space at NewsBTC, as well as the Goldstein magazine. So I come at this thing from multiple different angles, and I'm here to assist the mass adoption, basically, and awareness and education, much as like what you do. And then, of course, there are very special collectibles for those who are on the inside of this whole space. So there's lots to cover, I suppose. That's the short answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that that's a really important piece that people might not just initially get from reading the media, that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is about a whole lot more than money.
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole technological innovation behind it, of how many different things it's going to influence, is absolutely massive, and it coincides with innovations like AI as well. And one of the art pieces, actually, that was sold at a public auction to this very controversial crypto figure called Craig Wright, who bid it for himself, was called Hello. And the topic of it was that due to other things, I kind of started to understand that because it doesn't require for you to be a human being in order to trade with Bitcoin. Obviously, when artificial intelligence becomes more autonomous, eventually, it will start to use cryptocurrency as its medium of exchange. And I started thinking about things like, well, it'll eventually not only create art, as it's already starting to do, but it will collect art. And that's just the macrocosm of art that it's influencing in a massive kind of way that might change the whole rules of the whole of the art game. So it's essentially this sort of AI saying hello, and it's integrated with the Bitcoin logo. So it coincides with many other different things, as well as just the currency space.
That's interesting that Craig Wright purchased that piece. I did a video interview with him not that long ago for CCN, and I'm actually, right after this, recording sort of like a social history of Bitcoin to try and explain why there is that tension in the community with him. Because if you don't understand Bitcoin as ideological, or understand that the original followers or people who supported the Bitcoin ecosystem had ideological surroundings of Bitcoin, then it doesn't make sense why Wright has been ousted from the community.
Well, yeah, it does for as much as I can understand about that whole thing with my limited understanding of technology coming into the space, is that by the writings of Satoshi Nakamoto, and I suppose the political inclinations of forcing the competition into the banking system and not being entirely, let's say, government friendly from the get-go, Craig Wright seems to be from the opposite end, and he's very much with sort of laws and regulations and making Bitcoin something that complies with a lot of the different kinds of things. And it does feel a little schizophrenic in terms of personality when it comes to some of the writings of Satoshi Nakamoto and his claims of being Satoshi Nakamoto. And there's many other different things, but I seem to be at the epicenter of many of these kind of controversies. And much like I said, as a war photographer, because we were raising money for the homeless at the CC Forum with this public auction. And Craig Wright, he was bidding with his middle finger. Sorry, I didn't mean to give you the finger,
okay,
but in general, he pissed off the crypto insider, James Bowater, who was doing the auctioning on stage as well, because he wasn't sure whether he was bidding or giving him the finger or what the hell was going on. And just before then, because I do have this one art piece, I'll come back with this loop as well, because this is important. It's likely one of my most important art pieces, but it's a bit of fun. It was meant to be my Dogecoin, because I usually deal with these very serious topics with my art, and this time I wanted to make something super light, because I was a guest at the Bad Crypto podcast show. I'm not sure if you've listened to those guys.
I'm familiar with them, yes.
Cool. So my episode was 130, and we did the World CryptoCon last year together. They were doing the sort of emceeing, and I was the artist, and they gave me a big leg up. So to commemorate being on their show, I wanted to make this art piece that was about fun and different kinds of coins, and as they borrowed their thunder a little bit from Michael Jackson, the logo. So I made this fun sort of art piece that has this very Dumb and Dumber type of theme, that has a mini movie about it as well. Live on stage, we ended up getting not only Travis and Joel to sign it, but also Maxine Ryan, Vinny Lingham, Ronnie Moas, and Charlie Lee. And we decided to give it away for this Houston-based charity called Hawk. And they're fighting against violence towards women and girls for 40 years already. And this fantastic lawyer called Blake Rizzo, who's also the lawyer of the Litecoin Foundation, had set up a direct wallet for them. So we decided that we're going to try and attempt to make this the most expensive art piece made in the crypto space, and raise over $1 million for this charity. And basically, because of this, I started getting all of these different signatures. Now it's Andreas Antonopoulos and Vitalik Buterin, Bobby Lee signed it, Roger Ver just signed it. But also before, Peter McCormack signed it, the guy from What Bitcoin Did, the podcast. And he signed it, Peter McCormack. Peter McCormack, and underneath he put Craig Wright is not Satoshi in initials. So of course I told this to Craig Wright when I met him in London, and I had to, in fairness, give him a rebuttal for this whole thing. So Craig Wright signed this piece as in Craig Wright, aka Satoshi Nakamoto, and then he went back to Peter McCormack's signature and wrote soon to be bankrupt Mr. McDruggy, because he's suing him for libel here in the UK, and quite openly attempting to bankrupt him for all the things that he said. And while I think that's absolutely ridiculous in so many different kinds of ways, it's almost ended up like this pissing contest of billionaires and super egos and everything, and the flawedness of the community and the tribalism and the weirdness, as well as all the beautiful things that what this space stands for. All of us united, sort of radical inclusion, if you're a majority type of influencer in this space, trying to get this over $1 million for this charity that is as legit as it gets for a great cause. So it's those kinds of things that I really love about this whole thing. Is like, because it does get so tribal, and it does get a little weird sometimes. So if
really weird,
if as an artist I get to do something, yeah, right. So but what I get to do is to keep the big picture in mind of what we're up against and what we're really trying to do, so it doesn't get too sort of separated into segments, at least in the art pieces, so we have our head towards where we should be going. I think that's part of what I think my contribution to the space is.
Right. So I love that what you just said is like, even with all of the rifts in the community, everyone came together to support this one cause. And then you used a word, radical inclusion, which makes me wonder, are you a burner?
Uh, well, I suppose, yeah, I haven't been to any of them, but in terms of spirit, I suppose I wouldn't be too far off feeling like an alien in that space. But yeah, that's yet to happen for me to be a part of it. But I've certainly done my psychedelics and my meditations and sort of spiritual journeys, and in one way, I think those really help. Because I just did a keynote at the Litecoin Summit as well as the World CryptoCon.
Mhm.
I was able to repeat pretty much the same thing, and one of the things that I thought was important to say, because quite often it's not so strange to talk about spirituality and religion to Americans, but here in Europe, because I'm based in London and come from Finland, it's certainly not something that it's super downplayed and even looked down upon and this kind of thing. So, but my own journeys into that kind of realm allow me to. I never became religious in a dogmatic kind of way at all, and I just try and discover what the truth is. And if I didn't become religious about religion, I'm not going to be one that becomes super dogmatic about technology, essentially.
Right.
And what I started realizing is that you basically, they have many similarities now, especially when it comes to the tribalism, because you have the Messiah Satoshi, then you have the 12 apostles, that is probably 120 apostles right now. Then you have the religious followers who, really get in and say that if you now support this apostle or this coin, then we can't be friends anymore, and I must attack you from across the border. And and it's very, very like taboo to say anything about religion or spirituality in the tech space altogether. But because it's so void there, I think what is there's a little bit of self-reflection that is missing from just how religious people are about crypto. And while I understand it to a certain kind of degree, and ousting the scams and sort of a healthy kind of competition, but I think would do it good to maybe self-reflect a little bit on that kind of thing, to not lose sights on where we're going with it.
I couldn't agree with you more. My background is in religious studies, and I saw religion in blockchain immediately. In fact, that's what made me want to learn more about blockchain. As I said, I spent my whole life studying this. Now I could actually apply this to a field that people are, employable in. and,
Right.
and that's why I got into blockchain, was to understand how it correlated with religion. And you're definitely right, there are people who are extremely dogmatic, and the maximalists are a really great example of that, the people who think that there can only be one blockchain, right?
There's a funny thing that one of my friends, this influencer called Cody, who I love dearly,
Oh, that's
what he
funny. I just
says
talked to
when.
him the other day. He was just on the show.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Cody. And what he just posted at some point when he was confronted about being a maxi. I think he said, can I get a job at Bitcoin? Which pretty much sort of, and from my perspective, a lot of the different kinds of solutions that are really desperately needed in the art world and the evolution that the blockchain solutions are doing there, simply at this moment cannot be built according to many different kinds of coders on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's simply too cumbersome, and it can't facilitate it. So while like financially and store of value and security and those kinds of things, I really do appreciate BTC it far above many others in terms of actually necessary solutions that we really needed yesterday already. I can't get on board with the sort of maximalist point of view, because if anything has utility, if there's a necessity for something and then it functions, then it should have value. So to say that everything else apart from BTC is a shitcoin comes across a little strange. And to think also, like, if you take the perspective of, let's say, the next 10 years, if BTC is the only successful blockchain to come out of this whole innovation, I don't think that's a realistic kind of proposition. But that being said, then there's all the other things that, are actually worth zero, and the scams and those that should be ousted, and they should be maximed out of the whole space. So it's a negotiation, like everything in life, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that you're right. There are lots of coins and projects out there that are not serving any real world purpose, that they're not really working hard to develop, that there are other things that will knock out competition. And of course, the straight up scams, that's for sure a real thing. And it's a real thing that anybody who's thinking about investing in cryptocurrency should fully investigate for him or herself before making that decision.
Sure. What was your rabbit hole into the crypto space, if I may ask?
It was Ethereum.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was the Ethereum DAO hack occurred, and my boyfriend had talked about Bitcoin and Ethereum kind of like, you know, abstractly a little bit. So I'd heard of them. And then when the DAO hack occurred, you know, I think the price of Ethereum went to like from like $18 to, you know, $7. And at that point, he told me that he was going to quit his job and get his 401k and purchase Ethereum because it was at like a huge discount and he knew that it was coming back.
Wow.
And that's when I started to research it, because I was like, wait, you're like willing to give up your future financial freedom for this because you think, not only you think it's such a good investment that it's going to return, but that is when I saw the religious correlation with Ethereum. And then when I started to look into the actual difference, like Ethereum Classic versus Ethereum, and the, you know, code is law versus code can be changed to suit the people who it serves, that is when I really started to pay attention and dig my heels in a little bit deeper. And then I got, you know, into the Singularity Net, which is Ben Goertzel's project. And I've always followed Ben's work with AI. And I saw I saw an obvious correlation between blockchain and AI. And that's really where this all started for me.
This is exactly the kind of conversation why I love being in this space altogether, because I never, I suppose as an artist and with a strange life story, I've always been a little bit of an outsider and a bit of a weirdo in so many ways, or at least feeling like that in the majority of the different kind of other communities, even with the sort of the burners or, you know, all that kind of stuff. I've never really felt fully at home. And I think with the cryptocurrency thing, I think it's finally what really calls me about it is that it does have the worldview of something that is perhaps spiritual based or vision based or something much further than just making profit or making a product, or maybe but it's not sort of hippies sitting around in a drum circle wishing the world was better either. It's like this whole encompassing worldview and the entrepreneurial spirit, resources to do stuff and people still support the arts. All of these things come together, and most people are ever so happy to talk about artificial intelligence, or they're happy to talk about the different kinds of journeys they've done, or what's happened to them for them to become these sort of, let's call it a more integral sort of point of view towards the whole world. And it's beautiful. I really, I'm 41 now, and I finally pretty much feel like I found, if I can be tribal, my tribe in that kind of a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same. Always in academia, I felt like a little bit like I was kind of an outsider. And then I would say that there's probably two places where I feel like, okay, I've found my tribe. And those two places are, you know, Burning Man and within crypto. So like when I go to a conference, I never really even feel like that's work, because I'm surrounded by people who think the same way that I do, or at least much more similarly than my, you know, world community.
Right. Also, if you keep hearing weird noises, that's my boxer dog, who is very disrespectful sometimes about television interviews, but he hates being alone in the other room, so I let him be here.
Oh, my dog is right by my feet as well.
Cool.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about, you've got a beautiful art piece behind you, and that's one that you created. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, yeah, sure. I selected that to be the background because I thought that was perhaps one of the easiest entrances into what it is that I do in terms of the art stuff. And I get my inspiration from a variety of different kinds of things. I actually made a documentary film in the Finnish language with Finnish experts, with some other guys, about the monetary system a decade ago. And at a time when it was really a taboo kind of subject, and I didn't do myself any sort of, let's say, entrepreneurial favors being in Finland and making this film and putting my face on it as well at the time. And basically, it's the whole worldview trying to be encompassed into something that is as simple as possible, that helps the mass adoption to communicate to those who might have only heard about Bitcoin in passing. And in this particular case, I can't even remember which podcast it was, but the host said something very smart at the end of it that was funny. He said, Bitcoin is kind of like South Park's Kenny keeps dying and coming back to life. And I thought immediately, boom, that's the image. So it was South Park's Kenny with these super cute puppy eyes melded with Bitcoin and these sort of battle-hardened, blooded-up wings, and even the signature sort of bleeds because it's instantly recognizable. But and it's kind of funny. Most people chuckle when they hear that, but it leads to a serious conversation because even NSA has been hacked, and while the individual exchanges, aka those places where you trade Bitcoin to dollars or yen or whatever, while those centralized exchanges have been hacked, the actual system of Bitcoin, no one's managed to crack it, even though they've 24/7 tried for the whole decade of its existence. So in terms of when people say that, okay, it doesn't have any value and what's this whole thing about, what's it worth to the world to have the most secure digital system ever created? I mean, to say that that doesn't have any value, I think is a little divorced from reality at this point. So though that's the kind of thing of what it is. It's first an instant recognition of something that then perhaps leads to a conversation that helps this space evolve. And on the other side, for those of us who are more on the inside, who already know maybe a little bit or a bit more about what this whole thing is, it's because I make it in a specific kind of way. I paint and I photograph in nature, and sometimes I body paint people, and I put it all together with Photoshop. So they are these high resolution museum grade digital originals. And because I don't have an oil painting original like the majority of other artists have, it's sort of mixed media. And what I decided to do is to print only 3 of them in this specific kind of way onto canvas and then repaint on top of them with acrylics. So it becomes a very rare edition. And this is the medium option. There's also a very luxurious, much more expensive option, and then these smaller prints that are limited edition of 50. But essentially, this is the thing that most people think is not only affordable, but something that they think is going to store the value because it has my actual signature in terms of the acrylic paint, as well as it's verified on the blockchain. But I did find myself going through a lot of different conversations earlier about what makes art valuable to many people in the crypto space who didn't really have any sort of background as to what makes art valuable, because they're essentially in the tech space, and it's you have many savants and it's not the most emotional space, and sometimes in those kinds of ways, or has that tradition. So I found myself giving these lectures of 10 to 15 minutes to people whose eyes started glazing over and and that kind of thing. So a friend of mine called Michael Johnson, who's been in this space for a long time, he made a suggestion some times ago that why don't I tie it to the price of Bitcoin? So these repaints, the other ones are stable sort of US dollar currency values, but these are tied to the price of Bitcoin. So now if you think that Bitcoin is going to moon, or it's going up in value and it's now something like $8,700 or whatever, it's in terms of what I've been able to accomplish before, like some of my projects.
Really quick. It's November 12th, 10:29 a.m. So watching this at another time, Bitcoin's value could very well be radically different. That's all. Just wanted to make sure that we noted the date and time.
Very cool. Well, that's the whole point, is to encourage people to not only use their Bitcoin, but know that the value of one Bitcoin is what this is going to be if bought commercially in 10 years as well. And that might be $500,000. And what I realized, because Michael said that this would be a good idea, that it would create a little bit of like, fear of missing out, FOMO, as they say. And it absolutely did. And people started collecting, like even Tone Vays, the famous trader. And you have Nicole from the Blockchain Valley, who just collected one to their head office. And these beautiful things started happening because the price seems to be about the pain threshold of the crypto collector space at the moment. While it's going to go up, from my perspective is that I'm about to travel to Miami again to go to Art Basel.
Mhm.
And just a little bit of background outside the crypto bubble is that when you go to Basel, you have a bunch of very mediocre art pieces that, in terms of, I believe, sustaining value, or what the real substance of them changing the world or becoming valuable art in the future is minimal. And they are 50,000 pieces and going much, much up from there. And because what I earlier realized that, if I'm doing top crypto art and I have a big presence in this space right now, these should be the minimum of 50,000 up to, some of these pieces that Tone just collected, which was the third one that featured the whole Forbes article on the new crypto of art movement. I mean, these things are super valuable. So, I've just said, whatever it is, it's 1 Bitcoin, period. So it's an opportunity to get in really early, have incentive to actually part from your Bitcoin, which is not what people like to do. Because, if it's going to be 100,000 and you think, okay, I'll buy this now, but I'm basically essentially then buying a very, very expensive piece of art. And if I want my Bitcoin back, I'm going to have to, all those kinds of different things. So that's the whole of the package pretty much of where I'm coming from. And then if you allow me still to ramble on just a little bit more, then you have projects like what I did with the Litecoin Foundation just a while ago. They commissioned for me to do an art piece, and that ended up being pretty much the past, present, and future of money and the currency wars and the future of the planet and that kind of thing condensed into one image. So, and that was a long 3-month research period. And of course, it ties back to my whole 10-year journey since I made the documentary film about the monetary system and these kinds of things. And just to substantiate the Dogecoin and this kind of fun stuff, I also body painted this Bollywood actress in 2013. We released this whole thing, and it was quite a controversial thing again because she was Pakistani and Muslim. But we made this 6 art pieces that commented upon the common origin of all spirituality all across the world. And they're beautiful art pieces, even if I may say so myself. Enough people have said that. But even in controversial Pakistan, they didn't get upset because they realized that this was a bridge building project as opposed to something sleazy body painting type of thing. But these are the kinds of things that I've done before, and why I've been afforded many different kinds of opportunities here in the crypto art space. I was able to, in a couple of years, raise quite fast and start to be a part of many of the other names who are in this space. And I feel ever so privileged. This is so fantastic. I'm so happy.
Yeah, that's a common trend within cryptocurrency, right? Like most of us, even though we'll occasionally complain about like how fast things move in the crypto space, like most of us are working within blockchain or within cryptocurrency because that's exactly where we want to be, and like just feeling incredibly grateful for that. It's a trend. I've seen it.
Sure. So where do you see your own contribution? Is it like as an influencer with this TV channel? Do you go to conferences and things like that as well, or?
Yeah, so I was at WCC and I saw your display there. I think that just Fly had talked to you or was talking to you, and I was just kind of Fly's the station owner, of course, and I was doing some interviews and things. Like I was talking to Lynn Ulbricht. And Charles Hoskinson, and just some other people whose PR agents had reached out to me prior to attending the conference. We had several interviews with various different people. I don't know if you're familiar with Matt McKibben from Crypto Psychedelic.
Oh, I haven't. No, that's the first that I've heard of him.
And they have a really amazing blockchain art project as well. So it may be something that you'll want to potentially look into because they're doing right now, what they're doing is they're turning the Crypto Psychedelic website into a place where blockchain or cryptocurrency artists can display their works for sale, and then a small portion of the proceeds from each sale go to funding psychedelic research, which is MAPS, essentially.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's super interesting, because I do know about MAPS and all of the work that they've done, because I have as a kid, there was some fairly unfortunate situations that happened and some that didn't happen. So that was part of the reason why I got into psychedelics, was to just basically heal myself from childhood stage PTSD. So the work that MAPS is doing and going up against the sort of normal grain of what is essentially one of the dumbest things that we've ever done, which is to outlaw psychedelics, and the kind of sort of so that thing. So I have a lot of respect for MAPS, and I'm ever so happy if they've looped it back to the research that they're doing and the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I'll compose an email or a telegram or something and connect you to, so that you can, talk at some point, if that makes sense. And then also, I'm the director of content for Artcryption, which I don't know if you're familiar, but that's a blockchain startup that aims to protect artists' IP rights.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right. Yeah, I'd love to get to know that as well. And to loop back a little bit, because you mentioned Lynn Ulbrich. Mm-hmm. We're doing a collaboration together, because I have an art piece called Silk Road. Mm-hmm. That essentially ended up being an interesting take, because I wasn't that familiar with Ross's story at that point. I just knew the sort of origins of Silk Road and ever so slightly, but I didn't know about the murky details of the whole court case, and especially hadn't even met her. And I made this art piece in a more general type of thing. It was basically these camels that run at a race towards you in this sort of triangular shape. And it's quite this animalistic type of thing. And what I wanted to do it as was this comment that now that us as individuals start to get more power, let's say from the point of view of something like Monero, you can hide your transactions, or you can do all sorts of shady stuff if that's something that you're into. It's like that if you have a powerful engine, you should then have self-reflective, powerful brakes too. So it's a comment on this whole sort of letting your animal nature loose type of thing, as in that be careful that just because no one's monitoring you, that doesn't mean that you don't get burnt, nor that you should let your engine go wild, and it's those kinds of things that hopefully help the community to reflect a little bit of what they're doing. And while I think it's absolutely necessary that we get more responsibility and we get more power to do and guide ourselves in the freedom principle, that ended up being then something that I was connected to Lynn via Adam Williams from World CryptoCon. Mm-hmm. And we auctioned the 1 out of 3 of these pieces, so that it was 50-50. It was 50 to Ross and 50 to me. And now I just donated the very first sort of smaller print to her entirely, which is now on sale, I believe, on her website already. I'm not really sure. But I basically said that at least every single one that I sell of the Silk Road will go 50 to, if not more, to Lynn. And it was an incredible moment at World CryptoCon, because it just so happened, because Lynn was across to me almost from
right.
Her
that's
booth.
Why I mentioned that I was talking to Lynn, because I saw your booth actually while I was talking to her, and I've known her from before, because she does the conference circuit, of course, and I don't do it nearly as extensively as her or as some people like Cody or Ken, but I probably do one a month.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it just so happens that Ross called in when she was across the booth, and she came to me with her phone, so I was able to actually exchange a few words with Ross. So that was a surreal moment.
That's incredible. I just wrote him a letter, actually, because I wanted to request. Nobody has actually, except for his family, of course, nobody has gone and talked to him since he's been imprisoned, like no reporter or journalist, which is kind of my background, because I was writing for freelancing, but mostly writing for CCN before I started this with the channel, with Fly's channel. I don't know. So yeah, a journalist is kind of my thing. And so I wrote Ross a letter asking if it would be okay with him if I filled out the paperwork and requested an in-person interview.
Well, that's like, I really, I love journalists, especially those who have the actual ethics, because as you well know, there's many journalists these days, but I think they're so important to the space from the balancing sort of point of view to things, and to maintain that kind of integrity with this thing, so that it remains sort of reflective and shows two sides of the story, and and those kinds of things. So I really appreciate the perspective that you bring into this, because I think what I'm trying to do is a little bit similar. And to talking about shitstorms that happened, I was there, right there, when Joerg Molt and Kenn Bosack, that whole thing kicked off right next to me. I was dismantling my World CryptoCon booth as I saw Kenn come in and just sort of pick up the phone, and I was like, here we go again, because I'd seen the previous one. So that ended up being quite a thing, because also Joerg Molt signed the Bad Crypto podcast piece before, as well as Kenn. So that piece of legend is now engulfed into that charity piece as well. So I seem to be like, I don't even know what the next one is, but what I'm going to be witnessing. But I hope it's going to end up in that art piece too, so that it becomes even more legendary.
Well, yeah, it sounds like you're setting yourself up here.
A little bit, I guess. But you know, it's in one way, while I have my own opinions, and let's say, like, I don't even know the Ross case well enough to really speak on it. What I feel very secure in saying is that the sentence that he got felt draconian. And, you know, he shouldn't be sort of thrown away the key, locked in prison. And I do hope that if in some small way I contribute to that family coming together, it does feel from every kind of communication of what it is, that there's sort of shady stuff and maybe a little bit on both sides and whatever, but he shouldn't be there for forever. That's ridiculous. And it's heart-wrenching sometimes to, as well as amazing to see what Lynn does. I mean, she's an incredible mother. We, like anyone, like I'm blessed to have my mom. But also, I look at her from the side and going like, if the world was full of moms like that, I don't think we'd have a whole lot of problems. So much respect for her. But it's also when, I mean, and she does the circuit and she's there, and sometimes, like, you know, people forget of the pain behind the whole thing. I mean, they give the respect and everything, but there are moments when sometimes you see through the sort of conference Lynn to the actual purpose and the meaning of why she's there. And it's hard to maintain like dry eyes thinking about what it must mean to her to be a part of that. And of course, every time someone gives something back to her, when people help them out, I think it's immensely valuable. But what it did lead to, and this might be a little bit of paranoid from me, but because, you know, Charlie Shrem also signed that piece and whatever, there's a lot of different kinds of things that have happened in the Bitcoin space before. So 2 times now that I've flown out of London, I've been selected for a random security check. And it happened now going to Vegas. And this time I was actually escorted from putting our bags into the luggage. The TSA came in and took me and my fiance into the sort of security pat down, like a special kind of thing. And I'm about to fly to Toronto to do a Charles Hoskinson commission, and from there to Miami. So I'm actually dreading a little bit if I'm selected again randomly for for something. So being involved with this space, I don't have a criminal record. I haven't ever done anything, you know, that kind of thing. But I think the associations in this space, no matter how you do them, they don't also come for free. And I think, you know, the more into the mix of this all I sort of get, the more strange some things are probably going to eventually get. But thus far, I've been fairly well protected, I suppose, in terms of not attaching myself too much in terms of the substance, nor sides, or the tribalism, and just focus happily being involved with a bunch of amazing people. But then also I have my own thing of what I'm doing here, and I do need to protect the integrity of it. And in some ways, it's a very uncompromising position that I find myself in too.
Yeah, I agree. It's really hard not to take sides though, sometimes, right? Like, I definitely have emotion caught up in all of this blockchain stuff. And yeah, as a journalist, I you know, strive to remain impartial, but just as a human being, that's not always possible.
I had to struggle with a few names on that Bad Crypto piece, not to paint them over after certain things had happened. But, you know, I then reminded myself that as a Finn, we grew up next to Russia, and there was a certain individual called Stalin who did a bunch of that kind of stuff. And if we're to maintain some sort of balance and integrity, then we let history be what history actually is. And I suppose that definitely what I feel is like, because when Craig Wright signed the bad piece, and when he collected that the free auction thing, a lot of the BSV community started sort of popping up in my feed, and some of them quite clearly wanted to convert me from BTC to BSV. And they were asking some of my opinions of what I think about certain things. And I just said, well, my honest opinion is that I'm open to learning about it. I want to learn more. There's so much that I don't know. But it does come across that I didn't think it was a bright idea for Roger to try and claim BCH to be Bitcoin. And I think it's an even worse idea to BSV to try and claim that it's Bitcoin. And I understand some of the technological differences and the ideological differences and those kind of things. And you might say that it always was designed to have these big blocks, and it was never to be all confirming. And while I understand that, it's the same thing. I didn't erase those signatures that I really wanted to. And I think if, because it muddies the water, especially for those who are trying to come into the space, and maybe they go to bitcoin.com to begin with, and they start to so BCH core, all that kind of stuff. And it just makes it so much more difficult for those who are only coming in. And I suppose that gets into the religious sort of sects and forking, and, it's a very, but that's my opinion. I think people should honor history and be fine with the fact that some things happened.
Yeah, so when I went to interview Craig last June in Toronto, I went to the CoinGeek conference in Toronto to meet with him and Calvin and the BSV team. I spent the day learning about BSV and, why it's different and big blocks, and sort of trying to be open to an alternative view from the, position that I held. And, that's really hard, because I guess I was coming there as an outsider or as like an enemy. So I was thinking the whole time, like, gosh, people are being so mean to me. How do they think that they're ever going to get somebody to change their mind when they're being so mean? And then the next day I went to a Crypto Chicks conference, and everyone, that's Vitalik's family runs that operation. Crypto Chicks is something his mom started. And so I felt like, oh, this is my community. I'm so happy. And then within a day, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what if I were Becky Leggero, who's like the spokeswoman for BSV. She's their anchor person. And I said, gosh, what if I were her coming to Crypto Chicks? Like how much under attack would I be? And that is really what made me say, I need to like step back from all of this anger again, this anger, and just be nice to everyone, no matter what.
It's well, I've in one way, it's a luxurious position that I have. Let's say with the it's called Blood on the Podcast Floor, the over $1 million charity piece, and every time I've posted someone signing it, it's either publicly or privately. Someone's come to me, oh, that scammer and that bastard, how dare you? Like it's sort of, if there's a guilt by association, I'm guilty of everything right now in this space, because it has about 50 signatures of all of these kinds of people, and it's that perspective of seeing that there's no one, especially when I posted Andreas Antonopoulos' signature, I realized that there's no one who's good enough, because the amount of shit that people were giving to Andreas, and if he doesn't qualify, who does exactly? Right. So that gave me a sort of perspective of how to not take that stuff too seriously. And, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I suppose it came from between the lines.
Well, we've gotten way off topic, but this was a great conversation. And I think that it'll be a definitely entertaining and educational piece for anybody watching. And then do you also want to share how people can get in touch with you? Do you have a social media? Do you have a website?
Yeah, sure. It's the main website is artforcrypto.com. On Twitter and Instagram, you'll find me at @artbyvesa. That's VESA. And if someone's interested in knowing some about the body painting works and the abstract works, it's a site called artevo.org. So that's ARTEVO.org. And they'll find a very different kind of world over there, which they're also available via crypto, but they're not topically, I suppose they're more burner than they are sort of crypto. But those are the main ones. And I'm very open to being contacted. I'm not, and I basically give the art world shit as much as I possibly can for their elitism and printing the value of art into the ground like the Bolivar. So I'm also very, very open about the whole of what the strangeness in the art world. And so a part of this mission is to, I'm not sure if democratizing art is the right kind of word, but at least return it to something that makes more sense to people as to why it would be valuable, why it should exist with the human family, and what it's contributing to the whole of the big picture. Because if you allow me just to sort of say this last thing, because I really do think that it's important to get the foundations of why I do art in the first place, because I went through Dali and Picasso, but eventually the guidepost that I still have as artists is something like Michelangelo and Da Vinci. And what they did is, like, Da Vinci was building flying machines and building cannons to defend Florence, and he was both mystically and spiritually trying to figure out the whole of what life encompasses. And if you do go to the Sistine Chapel and you see all the paintings there, no one has to explain to you, kind of like you go to some contemporary galleries and they'll have a rock on a pedestal like that, and then they'll make you feel stupid if you don't conceptually understand the greatness of this whole new revolutionary thing that they did, which is utter horseshit, basically. So I like to talk about that, it's been, a lot of things have happened to the art and it now should become an integral movement. It should do things like, comment upon artificial intelligence. It should be part of the movement of helping cryptocurrency, or discovering what is not oil in the water of spirituality, or all these different kinds of things. And then if you do get beauty and awe and these kinds of things, and they hit you in the face, then you don't think that it's so much of a scam as you could easily think that the art world is. There's also many of these different kinds of correlations with the crypto and the art world. And basically, it's a long rant to say that I'm here to build. So again, I don't have much in common with some of the price trader bros, as in, like, that's the Bible of what they follow on the day-to-day basis. I'm not, while I pay attention to it, that's not the foundation of why we're here. And if you want to have some conversations or be a part of that, if it's a company, I like to build with them and do commissions and those kind of things. But yeah, I suppose that was a really long closure.
No, that was great. So I'm going to definitely put you in touch with both Matt and Vandana, who is the founder of Artcryption. And I'd love to do an episode where we sort of have a discussion, all three of us. Mostly you two talking, but me facilitating the discussion, I guess.
Well, you're very good at it, and you seem to have many insights into the space as well. So, that's... I'm happy to learn of what you do and what your contribution to this whole thing is. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for having me now. It's been really, really fun.
And you're going to be contributing regularly to Phoenix Crypto TV, is that right?
Yeah, that's what we talked with Fly, and again, another beautiful thing. I'm happy to.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to hearing a whole lot more from you, Vesa. I'm Nicole, you're watching Web3, and I'll be right back after this with Kenn Bosack.
Hi, Ken. See ya.
Thank you. All right, we're done recording.